Welcome, boys, to a whole new video. So we are actually not playing Honkai Star Rail right now. We are reacting to Dr. Ratio, or as also known, you get him for free apparently, which is great. But his name is actually not Dr. Ratio in the wishing thing. It's called Patanai Riha. I don't know how to pronounce that, but you get him for free anyways. But I just wanted to showcase basically one of my relics. So one of his ability is to do follow-up attack. So when Dr. Ratio allies attack a target affected by Wiseman Flawley, Dr. Ratio launches his talent's follow-up attack for one time against this target. So he's not really a follow-up attack user, but whoa, what the hell is this? When Dr. Ratio uses a skill, for every debuff on the target, his crit rate increases by 2.5 and crit damage by 5. This effect can stack 6 times. Damn, that's pretty good. But I haven't been upgrading him. I don't have any materials. Hopefully I can get enough by the end. But I just want to showcase, I'm using this set. I'm not sure what it is. We're going to be reacting to Dr. Ratio's broken best relics and artifacts, so I can see how to build him by Braxophone. Hopefully that will work out. But if I can use this, I have a crazy arm piece that I just got today. Look at that crit damage. I think this is the highest you can get. All of it just went to crit damage, which is nuts. So I just want to showcase that. But yeah, let's actually react to this. I want to see how to build him. So let's go.
There were plenty of disasters to occur after the founding of the United States of America.
That's true.
One of the most major being the Great Depression.
That's true.
It may not have been a natural disaster, but it was an economic one on a massive scale, leaving many countries, even outside the US, almost as devastated as Genshin players when they heard Star Rail was giving out a free 5-star. What's an anniversary, dude? Star Rail is just giving us free stuff every Tuesday.
I'm being honest. He is probably the first male that I'm like, holy crap, this guy's hot. Like, I've never felt that towards any male characters, but this guy was hot.
Dr. Ratio is the new imaginary hunt unit, and he's here to give you a free education, as am I. Because today, I'll be teaching you how to play and build Dr. Ratio so you can use this ridiculously powerful 5-star to clear the hardest content. My name is Braxophone, and let's talk about Dr. Ratio.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun.
So if you've been to college or around college students, you probably know that textbooks are way overblown in price and made mandatory most of the time in order to pursue higher education. Well, luckily for you, the only one you need in Dr. Ratio's class is the one he's going to bludgeon you with. A book isn't an effective weapon, so you should always skip his basic attack and ought to use his skill. Dr. Ratio's skill is high single target damage, and with the help of his talent, he has a 40% fixed chance to land a follow-up attack that deals a ton more. Every debuff that the enemy has will increase the fixed chance by 20%, meaning that with just 3 debuffs, you will always land a follow-up. Enemies take massive damage from the follow-ups the same way that I took massive emotional damage from professors following up on the homework I didn't turn in. When you use his skill, there's actually 2 traces that massively buff his damage potential. The first one gives him a base chance to reduce enemy effect resistance, which essentially gives him a debuff to use for free to proc his follow-up. And his other trace gives him a crit rate and damage buff based on the amount of debuffs an enemy has. It stacks up to 6 times, and the real kicker is that this buff is useful for the entire fight. All of his crit rate and crit damage buffs stick around for the entire fight and for all of his abilities. So you don't actually need to hit someone with 6 debuffs to max it out. You can hit someone with 3 debuffs twice. This man is sculpted like a Greek god. He definitely doesn't need all 6 debuffs at once. Something to know about his follow-up attacks is that if you defeat an enemy with his skill, his follow-up will actually target another random enemy. So you're never really losing damage from defeating enemies in the first place. Due to his doctorate in gigachatology, he's able to drop a Greek pillar on an enemy with his ultimate, dealing a ton of damage and applying
What's that?
He's able to drop a Greek pillar on an enemy with his ultimate, dealing a ton of damage and applying a buff that lasts for 2 triggers. Whenever a teammate attacks an enemy that has the buff from his ultimate, it'll trigger a follow-up attack from Dr. Ratio. I also love that in this animation, he's literally hitting enemies with an L+ ratio. His entire gimmick is just massive damage from follow-up attacks, but I really wish he would just follow up with me. Dr. Ratio also has a trace that increases his damage dealt to targets that have debuffs on them, increasing by 10% for every debuff as long as they have at least 3. Keep in mind too, damage over time counts as debuffs, so it's really not hard to max out all of these traces. Lastly, his technique creates a statue. Wait a second, is that a JoJo reference? If you enter battle with enemies in range of the statue, you'll have a base chance to reduce enemy speed, thus giving you a debuff for Dr. Ratio to use and also allowing you to attack more before taking any damage. Due to his ability to find the hypotenuse of a triangle and also throw chalk like nobody's ever thrown anything before, this man deals insanely high damage and he's absolutely free. I can't believe that, by the way. That's insane.
I know,
I'm still not over it.
nuts.
When leveling his traces, make sure to focus on his talent for the most damage, then skill, and then his
I honestly wish they could give us Black Swan for free rather than Dr. Ratio, because geez, I wanted Black
Next up,
Swan.
let's talk about relics so you can learn how to deal maximum
what I
damage
wanted
with
to
Dr.
know.
Ratio's really long, hard, rock hard, in fact, wide,
Okay.
girthy pillar.
Okay, everybody, relax.
There's not many things to think about when you're playing Dr. Ratio. Most of the time, you just sit back and enjoy being degraded by a muscular scholar. Everything about this character is a W, including his relic, because a lot of options for him are shared with other characters, meaning you may not even have to refarm. His best in slot with 50% in prison uptime or more is 4-piece Wastelander,
Damn,
but if you're
really?
looking for a more general setup, you could just run 2 pieces of
Let's
Wastelander and 2
go.
pieces of
Let's
Ash
go.
Blazing, which will give him 10% imaginary damage and 20% follow-up damage respectively. You can also give him a mix of speed or attack sets, and 4-piece Genius of Brilliant Stars is a top pick, especially against quantum weak enemies, while even still being just decent against enemies without quantum weakness. Now keep in
I
mind,
feel like every character, like every new character uses this artifact piece, because people were like putting this as for Jingliu for some reason. It's like, I guess because of like defense, but is it really worth farming this set just for the defense? I don't know.
decent against enemies without quantum weakness. Now keep in mind that we don't currently have a debuff-centered relic set, and given Hoyoverse's history, they tend to release best-in-slot sets for characters after they've already been released. We also know that Penacony is next patch, meaning we'll get some new relics, so it may actually be worth waiting to farm sets for Dr. Ratio until the 2.0 livestream reveals what the new Penacony relics will do. For planar sets, Firmament Frontline Glamoth, Inertial Soto, Space Sealing Station, and Rutilant Arena are good options. I definitely prioritize one of the first two though. For main stats, it's really easy. You want a crit rate or damage body, speed boots, an imaginary damage sphere, and an attack rope. You can technically run attack boots too, but I wouldn't recommend it since speed is such a strong stat and also lets you run Glamoth. For substats, just try to get a good 1-to-2 ratio of crit rate to crit damage and get at least 135 speed. Here's the finalized build plan for free. You're welcome. Actually, thank Dr. Ratio, don't thank me.
Okay, so I'm probably not gonna do this. I'm gonna use the this piece because I'm farming for my Kafka build as well as what's her name? Black Swan. I just said her name, but I'm farming for Black Swan and for Kafka. I might just use this because this follow up and he does a lot of follow up. But again, Penacony is coming out, so but I'm still farming for Kafka, so I might as well just keep doing it anyways. It's fine. Like cones, I still have the hunt one, so I'm just gonna keep using that.
W plus Ratio is kind of weird. He's sort of too smart to take anything seriously, yet he's also the type to call you out on minor spelling mistakes. If you pull for light cones based on their art, then you're incredibly based, but are we really gonna let the man with a rubber duck in his bathtub degrade us? Baptism of Pure Thought is his best in slot light cone, and it's incredibly strong on both him
What
and
does
other
he
hunt
have a
characters due to its
rubber
massive
ducky?
crit damage buffs and bonus ultimate damage. The defense ignore may not apply to everyone, but free crit damage is free crit damage. But if you don't want to swipe, then
Be gone, fuck!
since follow-ups are such a massive portion of his damage, Topaz's light cone is great on him, and it's also really cute. Other light cones like In the Night and Sleep Like the Dead are also pretty good for their stat bonuses. Now, Swordplay is a light cone that's good in theory against bosses. In fact, against bosses at S5, it's actually one of the best options for Dr. Ratio, but it can lose its effects when switching targets, so I prefer cruising in the Stellar Sea, or in his case, Stellar Tub, which is completely free to play. Otherwise, you can go with Only Silence Remains or River Flows in Spring. Here's a light cone comparison for Dr. Ratio, just for your own reference. If
I'm
you
not
want to know
reading
if you
that.
should get Eidolons or his light cone, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Also keep in mind that light cone rankings are subject to change just based on the type of content they are simulated in, and these rankings may not be the end all be all.
team selection. That's actually important because I don't know what team he'll be
A lot
good
of
at.
folks are pretty worried about Dr. Ratio and how restrictive he might be. Wait a second. A lot of folks are pretty worried about Dr. Ratio and how restrictive he might be. So I want to tell you guys about all of the free-to-play friendly options you have, as well as some of the 5-star options, just so that you can kind of figure out exactly what team you want to build for the Rat Man. By the way, Dr. Ratio is the Rat Man. Sampo is the Rat. They're very different. With Dr. Ratio being a hunt imaginary character, he's going to be a single target damage dealer, which means that he can work well with single target debuffers like Silverwolf. But I'm going to talk about that in a minute because I want to show you my favorite team first, which is going to be Dr. Ratio, Topaz, Ruanmei, and Welt. Now, I will say using Welt as the sole preservation character in your party, even though he's not at all preservation, only works if you can break them and keep them constantly imprisoned. I found that this team does a ton of damage and is actually suitable for Memory of Chaos, especially this cycle, but also in a way you don't even really need up this Memory of Chaos because it's all debuff focused. The idea with this is that Topaz and Numby apply proof of debt to enemies that counts as a debuff. Ruanmei's rebloom kind of thing that delays enemy break recovery and stuff, that is also a debuff. And Welt has 2 debuffs he can apply as well, not accounting for Dr. Ratio's personal debuffs, and also the ability to imprison and the ability to break. All of these characters can apply a debuff in some way. And because of that, you can have 100% uptime on Dr. Ratio, which honestly just feels really nice to use. Topaz and Numby are going to enhance Dr. Ratio's follow-up attacks. Ruanmei is going to buff the damage of both Topaz and Numby and Dr. Ratio, and keep in mind that Topaz is a DPS, even though she is sort of enhancing Dr. Ratio here. So you're running a dual DPS comp that are both hunt, both single target, and Welt's personal damage can also be really solid. So buffed by Ruanmei, and it's even.
Welt's damage is like very really good. It's underrated, honestly. He's really good at DPS. You can actually do a DPS well and just pull it off.
Better. Overall, this team feels really solid to play. The only downside is that it's mostly useful for things like Memory of Chaos. But if you're going to go to like Simulated Universe without Abundance Blessing, or just place an Overworld, you would have to heal up periodically just because of the nature of this team not having preservation character or a healer. So over time, your HP will drop. But for MOC, where you can just start at full health and go for it, this team's pretty damn good. Now, alternatively, you can also just play preservation or a healer, and that's totally fine too. Now, for other characters that you can use for debuffs, you can also play Pela and Gwenaifen if you're just looking for some 4 stars. Pela will lower enemy defense, and you can even give her this light cone called Resolution Shines Pearl of Sweat, which is actually on my Gwenaifen. Gives you a chance to decrease enemy defense, and that would also be another debuff that you can account for. Gwenaifen applies dots, which are debuffs, by the way, if you're wondering. And she can also apply Fire Kiss to enemies, which is basically a vulnerability where enemies receive more damage to them, which is absolutely awesome. Japard can freeze enemies, which I believe counts as a debuff the same way dots do. But if I'm wrong about that, I guess I'll Toaster Bath in game. And overall, you'll be able to get 100% uptime on Dr. Ratio's follow-up attack with this team. However, you don't have to use these characters. These are just 2 examples of 4 stars that you can use that can debuff. And Japard being a preservation is nice because Dr. Ratio being a hunt wants to avoid taking damage. He's very, very squishy, and Japard will prevent you from taking much of that. Now, for my next team, I want to talk about Silverwolf, because Silverwolf alone can apply enough debuffs for Dr. Ratio and more. Remember, this character can apply 3 different types of bugs that lower enemy attack, speed, and defense. And that is without accounting for her defense shred and for her weakness implant. So she can apply a ton of debuffs just by herself without even worrying about anyone else. Considering that Dr. Ratio will be primarily successful in single target scenarios, Silverwolf is great for him because she is also primarily successful in single target scenarios, and these 2 together are fantastic. King Yud is also just great for Dr. Ratio because she buffs attack, and she gives energy, and she gives damage bonus with her ultimate. She can be a pretty SP positive character. And then Fushuan is just another example of a preservation, just to try to relieve some of the stress that would be on Dr. Ratio as a hunt character that's very, very squishy. Now keep in mind, you can play healers too. I just like having a preservation because
Silverwolf, yeah. Silverwolf is so good. She's so good. You can just slap her in any team. I don't have her for my Kafka. I don't actually do. I have her. I might take her out of my Kafka team for my Black Swan, but we'll see. The team is really good. I like my Bailu more than Luocha, and I don't know why he keeps using this girl. I know you get it for free. Why does he just put it in there?
Because they have better top value. Now, what other characters can you run with Dr. Ratio? Well, I'm glad you asked. You can run Bronya, because from what I was seeing in footage, her buff does carry over through Dr. Ratio's follow-up attack if he triggers it, which means that he will be able to gain the damage bonus on his follow-up, and overall, she'll be a very strong option, as she is with every other DPS in the game. Himiko can also apply Burning, which is a debuff that you can use, and if you're running a dual DPS team, trying to get some AoE damage in there, Himiko can be okay for that as well. Not my favorite, but she does have a dot, which is debuff, so And the last character I want to talk about is Hanya, because she's honestly kind of weird. For whatever reason, the effect of burden doesn't actually count as a debuff. I don't really know why, because it says that you inflict or apply burden to an enemy, but it ultimately is more of a buff to your teammates. I don't really know why this is the way it is. Dr. Ratio is pretty flexible, but I do really like playing him with Topaz Numbi and Ruan Mei. And because of the break extension, playing Ruan Mei and Welt against imaginary weak enemies with Dr. Ratio feels really solid. So this is my favorite team overall, but he's a pretty flexible carry and can be played with most supports. Next up, let's talk about...
You know, you're gonna... Every character from now on is gonna either have Silver Wolf or Ruan Mei. That's just gonna be that's like the fact. You know, every team that you're gonna... If you're gonna get Black Swan, they're gonna be like, oh, get Silver Wolf or Ruan Mei. You know, that's how it's always gonna be now. It's never gonna be like, oh, you don't need Silver Wolf or you don't need Ruan Mei. You're gonna need both of them.
About what you're sinking your money... Wait, next up, let's talk about the cost of free.
I'm not gonna get add-ons, but let's just see.
If you were going to be pulling on Emmett Selk when they first dropped that bomb on us, then you probably have extra Stellar Jades lying around. Or maybe you just immediately spent it all on Blade's Light Code. Well, Dr. Ratio's Eidolons are very strong and drastically impact his damage, at least at the higher cost ones. Not super early on, so let me explain. Because if he wasn't so good at E0, I might actually be mad about it. His E1 gives him an additional 4 stacks of crit buff from his major trace, and increases the maximum amount of stacks that you can have to 10 stacks, meaning that he can now get 25% crit rate and 50% crit damage, as opposed to 15% crit rate and 30% crit damage. It's 40 extra crit value that doesn't come from his relics, making it a really solid buff to his...
Strong. What the hell? Getting... Holy smoke. That's like a... Dude, that's more than me rolling a full crit damage. From one add-on. Damn, that's
damage if you have
nuts.
bad relics, and just a decent buff overall if you have good relics. E2 is going to be a buff to his follow-up attack based on the amount of debuffs an enemy has, though it looks a lot better than it is. Decent damage increase, but nothing crazy. Eidolon 3 is the calm before the storm because it's honestly super mid. It's an ultimate and basic attack level up, one of which you'll never use, and the other which is not a super huge source of his damage anyways. But then you get to E4, which is crazy because it gives him 15 energy back for every follow-up attack triggered by his talent, which means that he's gaining 20 total energy on follow-ups from his skill instead of 5.
And you could just grab Tingyun, so you could have like 100% uptime on his ultimate if you have Tingyun. If you have E4 and Tingyun, you're just gonna have 100% uptime on his ultimate.
But if you read his ultimate, it says to trigger his talent, meaning that follow-ups from his ultimate triggered also get the extra 15 bonus energy. That means when you use his skill and you proc a follow-up, you're gaining 50 energy per skill, and out of his turn, he's still gaining 20 energy from 2 teammates' attack, meaning that his ult can practically go off every 2 turns. This ultimate every 2 turns allows your teammates to trigger more follow-up, and thus the cycle continues of you getting more.
Yeah, but you could have it in one turn if you have Tingyun, and I'm pretty sure everyone has at least one Tingyun. Not like I just had my C6 Tingyun, and I felt like so far behind because everyone has C6 Tingyun. But C6 Tingyun can give you like, I think it was 50% major recharge, or 50% of your ultimate, which is nuts. So you could have like in one turn, you could have his ultimate done. That's it. That's all you need.
More follow-up attacks and leading to more damage and more energy, and overall it's just a massive increase. Absolutely busted Eidolon in my opinion. E5 is the skill and talent level up, which is also a decent damage increase. And then of course you have E6, which when combined with his other Eidolons, over doubles his damage from E0. It increases the amount of triggers you have for free from his ultimate from 2 to 3, meaning that you can follow-up attack 3 times from teammates instead of 2. In a team where everyone is roughly the same speed, you'll get a follow-up attack every single turn. E6 also increases his talent's damage by 50%, which is pretty dang disgusting when you combine that with a follow-up every turn. Now, if you're wondering if you should go for Eidolons or his Light Cone, the answer is as straightforward as his reason for wearing an Alabaster head. His Light Cone is a better choice than going for early Eidolons. E1 is nice for comfort when building him, but his Light Cone is a pretty decent stat stick for most hunt characters, and on Dr. Rat specifically, it's a big power jump from his free-to-play alternative. Dr. Ratio's Eidolons don't get really OP until
you don't really need his add-ons, but I mean, if you really like this character, why not? You know? If you're just gonna get add-ons for every character, there's no point in doing that. But if you're just like, if you like this character, get his add-ons and his like gun. I probably wouldn't. I'll probably just level him up and probably never use him. But hey, you know, do you?
E4, and having this light cone is going to be a lot better than going for E1 most of the time if you have a decent relic setup. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed this video on the Bathman, and now if
Jeez, that was nuts. He might be actually crazy. Let me see how he looks. So I could do. Let me see, Dr. Ratio. Where is he at? Oh, there he is. Dr. Ratio. We could do Ruan May, King Yu. Oh, should I have Soul? I gotta have Bailu. Or actually, I could do Soul. Might be better. There you go. This is my team. He looks so cool though. I'm actually excited. And plus I have that one crazy piece. This is nuts. I don't have any other good pieces. I had to roll some of these, but I don't think I have enough. Also, I don't have his talents ready and what. But yeah, I finished her. I'll just show you now. 45, 101, 32. I have to do a little bit more. I have to finish her. Then I'm still doing Kafka. Kafka's still not built yet. I have all these three, but they're not that great. And yeah, they're not that great to be honest. This one's not. Well, actually, that's something else, but yeah, they're not that great. I haven't gotten anything good yet. But yeah, once I build him, it should be good. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy. Hopefully, you guys have the best Dr. Ratio out there so I could use him. I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.